Okay, let me get my script here. Welcome to the September 18th, 2024 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a resident advisory committee to the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters such as the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners, the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public. Community members are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and work sessions. Public comment is allowed on those topics for which a public hearing has not been held. And I will start roll call to my right maybe tonight.
Scott Nelson, District 4. Colin Bartlett, District 5.
Barry Halverson, District 2.
Eric Casino, I serve at large and live in the Lacey UGA.
Bill Fishburne, District 4.
Daniel Baumbarker, District 1.
Sandy Kaiser, District 3.
And Joel Hanson representing District 3. First on our agenda is are the minutes of the September 4th meeting. Are there any agenda? Oh, sorry. I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Next on the agenda, the September 4th meeting minutes. Does anybody have comments on those minutes or corrections? Motion to approve.
There's a script we're supposed to follow for that.
Oh,
That's in the agenda.
I will accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes and accept the audio as the official meeting record.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is public communication. Do we have anyone online? I'll read the script. The Thurston County Planning Commission welcomes comments from the public at all meetings. General speaking guidelines, please introduce yourself, including the address you reside in the county. Please address the Planning Commission, not the audience or staff. The Planning Commission may not respond to public comments. Speakers are limited to a total of 3 minutes. The timer will show you on one of the video screens to help keep track of time. Meeting attendees cannot donate their speaking time to another person. No comments that are lewd and offensive, inflammatory, hateful, defamatory, or discriminatory in nature. No comments that are commercial in nature, please. And all materials provided to the county may be subject to the release pursuant to the Public Records Act. Remarks on projects that have already had a public hearing are not permitted. Rhonda, would you like to address the planning commission tonight?
Thanks, Rhonda Larson-Kramer, at 1814 East Side Street in Olympia. And I just had a really quick comment. I had previously talked about the UGA swap laws, the one in 2022 and the one in 2024. And I wanted to correct something I had said previously. The 2024 swap law applies to all swaps, regardless of whether they are in a 10-year comp plan review year or in any other year. So the requirements under the 2024 swap law that are new and in addition to the ones under the 2022 law will still apply to all swaps. The 2022 swap law has a set of requirements and the 2024 one has those same set plus some. So it's the plus some that I'm really addressing, and those, the main ones would be you can't have increased development capacity at the end of the day when the swap is said and done. And you also can't have less groundwater protection when the swap is said and done. And that is a little complex because Thurston County has almost all of its ground is classified as critical aquifer recharge area, but it's just set out in different levels, moderate, high, extreme, the extreme being the one where the groundwater table is the closest to the surface, and so you need the most protection for that category. The 2024 swap law is a little bit of a mismatch because it assumes that the county does not have all of its land classified as critical aquifer recharge area. And so the 2024 law says that at the end of the day, a swap cannot result in more critical aquifer recharge area being inside the urban growth area than before the swap. Well, what does that mean for Thurston County? Because all of our land is critical aquifer recharge area, right? So really what it means for us is that we can't have less groundwater protection when the swap is said and done. And that means if the land being swapped out is a lower classification because the water table is lower, so it's moderate, and the land being swapped in is extreme, that's reducing, in the end of the day, protections for groundwater, and so that should not be allowed. So hopefully that explains a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I see at least one hand online, B. Norton.
Let's see.
Betsy,
Yes.
3 minutes and we can hear you now.
Oh, excellent. I would just like to bring your attention, we submitted this afternoon, Black Hills Audubon Society submitted some comments for the climate change chapter. We just wanted to focus on the wildlife corridors, and we're suggesting at least 2 of them be created, and the one in Nisqually be considered as a corridor in terms of opening it up so that it can create the proper estuary for habitat, and also to take into account some of the upstream impacts that are going to happen there. The county needs to think about zoning and what economic development you are supporting in that area. I also submitted some individual comments, which are rather extensive and mostly, hopefully, just useful for reference. And so I just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online? Okay,
I have those comments up and can share that with anyone.
Those are the ones that mostly had and reduced greenhouse emissions in most of the comments, right?
The one that I believe Betsy is referring to is one that got sent out about an hour ago, so it didn't be part of this.
Yeah, I'm looking to see, it refers to attachments. What she'll usually do is send it if she doesn't read from it, and then we'll make sure it gets out. But what's online is reference to attachments, which I don't know how to access right now. But we'll make sure to get it.
If I wanted to forward it just to make sure that it got through, which would be the best email to send it to? Is it going to be Amelia?
She usually sends them to me, and then we make sure it's in there. It's just when it's attached, someone has to manually like copy and paste and then put it in.
Tom Crawford. Tom, I believe you've been made a panelist.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, terrific. We can hear you now.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you to staff and commissioners for your time and attention to this most critical issue of our time, the climate breakdown, whose life-threatening consequences we are already experiencing. Thank you for taking a serious and honest approach to preventing the worst effects and protecting our communities from these effects through your work on the climate chapter of the Comprehensive Plan Update. I provided some detailed written comments on the draft chapter covering introductory material, policy areas, including land use, the built environment, transportation, community health, economic development, agriculture, and leveraging community partnerships. I would like to use my time this evening before you to touch on a couple of areas that are not directly addressed in the climate chapter. Excuse me. First, I believe a comprehensive regional coordinated public engagement and education effort will be critical to implementing the policies and achieving the goals stated in this chapter. broad understanding of the depth and breadth of the impacts of climate change, how it affects every aspect of our lives, and how the measures necessary to address this challenge can transform our community for the better, is necessary to mobilize our community members to do what it takes to address this challenge. Thurston Climate Action Team's current grant to increase, it's a grant from Department of Commerce to increase public engagement in the comprehensive planning process might be a part of this. Second, a cultural shift is required so that we consider first the needs and welfare of our community as a whole and what serves the common good, rather than focus only on the needs of individuals. Clean air and water, public health, healthy ecosystems, education for our young people, affordable housing, healthy food, these are examples of common goods necessary for a healthy community. And you know, the challenges that we face with climate change and climate change itself, again, is all about, you know, what's in our common good, what's in our best interest as a community. We need to find ways to give these all of these things a higher priority. A regional community education strategy can help shift our focus as a community toward the common good. Thank you again for your time, for your work on the comprehensive plan update, and particularly the climate chapter, and for the opportunity to share some of these thoughts with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And was Loretta Sepinen next?
She didn't have her hand.
Oh, okay. Sir, did you wish to address the planning commission?
I'm sorry, I'm late.
No, no need to apologize. Please state your name and address and then fire away.
My name's Terry Ballard. I'm a 35-year veteran. I retired in 2012. I live in Tanglewilde, 321 Wildcat Street, Southeast, in Lacey, Washington, which is unincorporated Thurston County. I don't know if I'm addressing the right people, but I'm tired of spending unincorporated money for the whole entire county. Like Capitol Lake, that's part of Capitol, that's part of the Capitol campus. We're paying for something out of our unincorporated fund that is, if it was part of the Lake District, it would be part of Tumwater and Olympia. Why aren't they stepping up to the plate? Why does the treasurer, endorse this action? He has nothing to do with this action officially, okay? And I'm tired of this building. This building is outside the county seat, period. This building was established, was annexed to Olympia in 1964. I have three attorney general opinions that says this is not the county seat. When the Superior Court wanted to move down, the Superior Court moved down to the other side, down the street from the courthouse, and that takes a judge to do that. Okay, a state, how they call it, the state judge. Okay, they tried to move the sheriff's department in a building outside the county seat. RCW 3628-160 prohibits that. The main offices. The county treasurer is here. That is prohibited in RCW 36.29.170. The county seat, the road engineer is here. That's in a violation of RCW 3680.015. Why are we paying for this building? We paid $10 million to fix up a building that we don't own, a $4 million building that we don't own. Now we got a $50 million bond, okay, to fix up building one, and they've been raping the funds, the O&M, the operational maintenance funds of the rental for that building for years. Okay, why are we paying $50 million? Why are we not started with the project? Why are we paying out $3 to $6 million of something that hasn't even started? Okay, and then the other day I was up there at the sheriff's department. Okay, and I saw all the court using that for their jury, building one for the jury. Unincorporated Thurston County funds. I'm tired of them spending them. I'm tired of them spending the money and not putting it out to all the other cities, incorporated cities.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Thank you for your
And
comments.
here's my list of all the violations. And that's just my draft form because I've been slowly working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who's raised a hand and wishes to address the planning commission? Okay, all right, terrific. And next on our agenda is continued business. We have work session number 22 on the Thurston 2045 plan, introduction to the transportation element.
Good evening, everyone. Andrew Bond with Community Planning and Economic Development. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay, so tonight's presentation is just on chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan, or the transportation element. I am joined by Becky Khan from Public Works to kind of help me as we navigate through this presentation. This presentation will be kind of a high-level summary of all of the changes that are being made to the chapter, both that are required as well as kind of supplemental as is required for plans that are a little outdated. So again, I will jump through the high level required updates that relate to transportation and climate, and then kind of dive into a little bit of the supplemental updates that are both just standard and clerical in nature. Open it up for questions and then kind of go into the next steps. So some of the key changes that we're going to be seeing with the required updates will include the multimodal level of service, or the MMLOS. And this is a requirement that just came from the state that requires the forecast of multimodal demands, with an emphasis put on the greatest safety improvements going to the top of the list. It also requires that the county take a look at the existing facilities that are in place and kind of plan on how to elevate those to meet that level of service demand. Another key requirement that's coming in with this chapter is the 25-year forecast. It's very similar to what we see in the CIP or the TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program, where it's a list of all the projects needed. And so this will be just simply a list of all the projects over the next 25 years that are needed to meet the needs of the county's growth projections. Some additional changes that we're seeing also relate to transportation facilities within an urban growth area and what are needed to maintain the growth, as well as identifying funding mechanisms to complete those projects. Additional changes include active transportation components related to bicycle and ped facilities, as well as a transition plan for transportation facilities as required by the Americans with Disability Act. Shifting into the climate related updates, obviously there are a lot that are coming that you're seeing with the climate chapter that do tie to transportation. And so 2 of those will be the greenhouse gas and the vehicle miles traveled, or GHG and VMT. Both of those focus on the reduction and not shifting the burden elsewhere within the community. One of the requirements is that the reductions should be emphasized towards the more overburdened communities and not putting the burdens back onto those communities, as well as not restricting growth to achieve the reduction. So what that means for us is that we have to think about the fact that growth will happen, but how can we do changes throughout our plan and our community to mitigate those impacts? Yes.
I just wondered in what context do we mean growth? Do we mean population growth? Do we mean economic development?
I think it's left pretty open-ended. I think it's just community growth. So that could be
It's
through
growth, yeah, it's like the growth projections that are required to use, like for housing and.
If we've already decided that we have a target goal of 5% of the growth happening in the rural county instead of 12% or one of the other ones, how does that factor into this calculation?
So it's not gonna be specific based on the calculation. It's gonna be goals and policies and just metrics of how we should be addressing it. And it leaves it kind of to the community based on the projections within the housing chapter of how we do this addressing. It's not like very specific in terms of like, if this projection happens, this needs to happen. It's just kind of more high level. But it's contains more active language that feeds closely into the implementation.
Where you're gonna see that distinction in terms of an analysis is in the EIS. So the EIS will actually have two different scenarios that it's looking at.
Mhm.
One, maintain the 12 to 14% essentially identified in the buildable lands report. And then the other bookend, which is, are we actually able to achieve no more than 5% growth? And so there will be a traffic analysis done as part of the EIS.
So potentially, we're gonna be able to hit these benchmarks easier with a 5% growth rate in the county.
That's what the EIS is intended to do, is be a document that informs policy decisions. And so you'll be able to see it, but it will come with tough choices, because to get to 5%,
Mhm.
like how do you, reduce capacity for development in rural
Incentivize urban
areas?
growth.
So
But we'd still be seeing the same total population growth. It would just be in different areas. So we're not actually violating the growth rule, right?
Right.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
The idea.
Okay.
it's just a shift.
Where they're at, not
How many?
And kind of just tying, it will lead to a lot of policies that relate to encouraging multimodal transportation systems to reduce the overall impacts of GHG and DMT. Shifting into the more supplemental changes, a lot of it will relate to work that the public works staff have done over the years in terms of updated road statistics, classification changes that have occurred, as well as maintenance statistics. We're also gonna see revised transportation capacity and level of service. They just recently did an update, and those are gonna be reflected now and updated within the transportation chapter. There's also going to be a whole slew of new maps, so bike and ped maps, stats and pics, as well as transportation maps with both the intercity transit and rural transit, and potentially a map that incorporates both to kind of see a full county perspective. And then we kind of just jump into the more general upkeep of the chapter. So one of the graphics that you see at the beginning of the chapter is actually going to look like the one that's on the screen now. It is taking the latest information from TRPC that they've collected over the years and developed a new, more informative graphic that a user can experience when they start reading the chapter. Also tying back, there are quite a bit of enhancements to the goals and policies to incorporate active language that you're also seeing throughout the rest of the comp plan that will easily tie back to the implementation plan. And with any plan, we're seeing a ton of clerical and formatting changes.
So those aren't real numbers, they're just some template.
No, so these numbers are accurate
Oh, they
based
are.
on the latest data from TRPC.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So the chapter is still being fine tuned at this point, but it will be released at our next meeting on October 2nd. And so from the beginning of our outreach in 2023, we've received about 37 comments. I apologize, it should say transportation, not capital facilities. Some of the themes that we're seeing relate to just increased multimodal options throughout the rural county, the timing of infrastructure improvements to ensure that they're logical and economical and don't come before, like, do they happen before or after the development occurs? Climate mitigation plan, the sustainable Thurston, and just kind of recognizing that climate change will have an impact on the county's infrastructure and that we should plan accordingly. Two of our key partners that we've been working with to just develop this plan and update this plan include Thurston County Public Works and the Thurston Regional Planning Council. So just a look into the future, like I said, on October 2nd, we're going to return with the full chapter. We'll also have our consultant who's been working on this chapter. And we'll also be touching on some zoning information. And then on October 16th, we'll bring the implementation plan as well as some development regulations, at least tentatively planned.
And another thing I just want to highlight, because coordination between all the work going on with the climate chapter and the housing chapter is really important. So Farron Pierce, the consultant working on this, is also the consultant that will be working on the EIS. And he's also worked with Cascadia, so there should be consistency across the chapters. But, you know, like with all the other chapters, as they come together, we might have to make some changes to accommodate small tweaks here and there.
Just shifting on, it's just kind of the ways to engage on Thurston 2045 and the short and sweet of the transportation element.
Don't see one itching to make comments, so I'll move to the next thing on our agenda, which is our public hearing on the 2025-2030 capital improvement program.
I think we gotta wait till we actually hit 7 o'clock. before we can do that. Yeah.
If you do have a tablet or can look over someone's shoulder, we did send out the comments that Betsy Norton referenced. And so we have a few minutes, you can look through those.
The who reference?
Betsy Norton.
Betsy and her comments.
Okay, we could do calendar or other business.
How much time do we have for hearing?
I've got
3
5
minutes.
minutes. Good.
This is a what, 9-page document?
Yeah.
We want to,
Themes that you'll recognize that.
Yeah, some
repeat
some.
themselves.
do you want to hit anything else on the agenda quickly? Looking at calendar item,
Staff updates.
staff updates?
Staff updates, we are recruiting for operations manager interviews this week, so we hope to have a decision made really quickly. We did extend the recruitment for the natural resources program manager, conservation program manager. We are seeing some good interest in that, but we wanted to allow for more time for the word to spread. And so hopefully by the end of next week, we'll be scheduling interviews for that as well. And we had our new education outreach specialist start this week. So Miriam's replacement, her name's Laura Tokarski, and she came from the Pacific Education Institute and has a broad wealth of knowledge doing education on forestry issues, specifically in K through 12. So we're excited to have her on the team. She seems excited to be here, so I'm sure you'll get to meet her at some point.
Do you think we can cover calendar
Sure.
3 minutes we have?
So we've got the next 2 meetings on your agenda, and let's see here.
Work session 23, Thurston 2045 Transportation Element Public Hearing, Martin Way and Land Use Rezone Amendment for October 2nd, and work session 24, Thurston 2045 Introduction to Implementation Appendix Development Regulations on October 16th.
Thank you. Do we have anyone that does not believe they'll be able to attend on October 2nd? Okay, good. Looks like we'll have quorum. And what about October 16th?
There's by any chance I might be doing something for my birthday that vacation week, but it's low.
Not with us?
It's the 15th is my birthday, but you don't know, you never know.
We can bring cupcake.
Cookies today.
I know.
I didn't even grab a cookie. Should have, but I'll probably be here.
We might, so we're hoping within the next 2 meetings, to also be able to share the housing allocation work that Thurston Regional Planning Council has been working on. It won't be fully integrated into the chapter, but it does exist as a separate package. And we want to make sure that Planning Commission gets to take a look at it, so as well as the public.
Well, we have a couple minutes. We can hit it again later, but for the good of the order, anyone? Oh, my cell phone says 6:58.
All right.
If it says 7 o'clock up there, then we will move to number 5 on our agenda, the public hearing for the 2025-2030 capital improvement program. And,
We should have a script to open the public hearing somewhere.
oh, okay.
No, that's the motion.
Skipping some stuff.
Yeah. Deal.
Here we go. Okay. The first time doing one of these. Okay. This is September 18th, 2024, public hearing on the 2025-2030 capital improvement program for Thurston County. Purpose of today's public hearing. Today we are to hold a public hearing on the comprehensive plan amendment item CPA for 2025-2030 capital improvement program, which is Appendix G in the Thurston County Comprehensive Plan. There is a sign-in sheet at the entrance to the room. If you wish to testify, please make sure you have signed in at the entrance of the room. If you are on Zoom and wish to testify, please choose the raise your hand option. If you are dialing in, press 9 to raise your hand. The chair or host will call your name and unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Make sure you also choose *6 to unmute yourself. Each person will have 3 minutes to testify. Names will be called for oral testimony. When you hear your name, please come forward to testify. Time may not be given to another person. When testifying, please provide your name and address for the record. Ask staff to review the public comment timer. Okay, we'll start by opening the public hearing. And next we have a staff presentation by Anna
Just a
Rodriguez.
short introduction. Good evening, commissioners. Anna Rodriguez, you all know me, I'm with community planning. Today, we're here to hold a public hearing on the 2025-2030 capital improvement program, which is also known as the CIP. CIP is Appendix G of the Thurston County Comprehensive Plan, and it is docket item CPA 4 on the 2024-2025 official comprehensive plan docket. The CIP identifies new, revised, and expanded capital facilities to be provided in the coming 6 years and the plan for financing them. This is a repeal and replace of the 2029 capital improvement program. The Planning Commission held one work session on August 21st, 2024. At that work session, the Planning Commission voted to set a public hearing for tonight, September 18th, 2024. Staff provided notice for the public hearing by publishing a legal notice in the Nisqually Valley News on August 29th. A web mailer was sent to all of the Thurston County folks who had signed up on August 29th, 2024, and a press release was issued on September 6th, 2024. Staff updated Thurston County's not comprehensive community planning webpage, with all available documents related to this hearing. We received no comments in advance of this hearing. Thank you, and I am available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have one person signed up to address the Planning Commission. Desiree Tolliver, do you wish to address the public hearings?
The mics will pick you up standing there.
Huh?
The mics will pick you up standing there.
I really just have some questions about how a lot of this stuff is done. There are RCWs that say certain processes are supposed to happen. As someone who lives in Olympia, Washington, and has lived here quite some time, I can acknowledge that there was a period where I was unhoused.
Could
And
you
I used a
quickly
different address.
state your name and
Desiree
and
Tolliver.
address for the
Olympia.
record? Okay, thank you.
I recognize there was a time where I was unhoused, so I might not have gotten certain notifications. But I do have lots of family members and friends whose addresses have been the same for quite some time, and they were not notified in any way, shape, or form that the public's supposed to be about certain things. I would like to add, they also were not notified when it came election day that the ballot drop box over there that had been moved. So there were lots of people who like rode the bus going to the library, thinking that they could vote and not knowing that the election ballot box had been moved over by the police station. So they hopped back on the bus with like their small children scrambling to try to get their votes turned in. I do feel like that's also a form of election engineering, restricting people's access to vote. But anyways, my biggest concern is about proper notification. I also would like to know if there's a way that it could be put publicly, each of the RCWs, as well as whatever notification Washington State or specifically the city of Lacey is claiming happened properly for people to be able to have input with capital gains, more specifically with like, just the cops, the new sheriff building. As well as I want to say, I know there are even some federal laws that were introduced in regards to just things in jails and in systems that do create major sources of inequity, such as furthering mental health issues and causing further disparity. And we haven't even confirmed if the little like jail cell holding area stuff that they're gonna build with it, is it going to be put in mind with what people are working for going forward as far as what any type of imprisonment should look like? Or is it going to be putting a lot of funds into measures that we already currently find inhumane? You know, which would be like double spending our tax money with building those facilities. So those are just my concerns.
Thank you very much. And do we have anyone online that wishes to comment in the public hearing on the capital improvement program? Okay, seeing no other members of the public that wish to comment, I will look at my script before I do anything else. Okay, I will close the public hearing. And now we have time for discussion of the capital improvement program. Does anyone have comments they wish to make? Yes, Commissioner Kaiser.
I was looking at the chapter 2 County Parks and Recreation Open Space Inventory. And it seems that it doesn't have some publicly accessible hiking areas in the county. Like I'm looking for capital land trust properties in particular. Not listed. So curious about that.
Anyone from Parks on Public Works who can answer Commissioner Kaiser's question? Not to aggressively punt it to you all, but you all have.
On there. People with the most knowledge, will know the answer. Anna? Ed Larson's on there, so.
Thank you.
Just unmuting myself here. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Ed.
you.
Yeah. So do I understand the question to be that we don't list any hiking or properties that offer recreational hiking?
There are properties in the county open to the public for hiking that are not listed in this inventory. And I was curious about, are we only listing here the county operated facilities? Okay, that was what I guess I was asking. So
Yeah, just county, yes.
okay, so we actually have additional options for those folks, and it seems like it would be good to try to capture some of those in a document like this.
Just maybe call out a potential resource where they could look them up.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to list them.
Would that be something that would be included in the parks chapter? Yeah, okay.
Are we referencing state offered locations for hiking?
In particular, I was thinking of Lake Lucinda, which is a area, actually Darlin Creek Preserve is what it's called, but it is a area near Lake Lucinda that's owned by the Capital Land Trust and open to the people of Thurston County for recreational use.
Gotcha. Okay. So my understanding is for the post plan is for Thurston County owned properties. And that would not fall under that category.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that would be more suited for another chapter in the comprehensive plan than the CIP. Thank you for your question.
Sure.
I don't know if, maybe Ms. Campbell, maybe the question is for you, I don't know. Appendix G, page 140 talks about a new sheriff's office renovation. It says property acquisition, design and construction. When you go back to page 124, it shows prior years, 5,297 and 2025, 6 million. Is that the new sheriff's office facility that, are we purchasing it?
Yes.
And the $6 million includes the purchase?
No, the building will be purchased this year.
Huh?
The amount that the board approved just yesterday is 14,250,000 for the building. And what you see in the 2025 CIP is the remodel of that building to make it suitable for the sheriff.
Okay, is that gonna be the sheriff's main facility now?
Yes,
They're moving out of the complex up on the hill.
they have part of the, so in building 3
Right.
on the hill, there are the detectives and the administrative division.
Yeah.
In Tumwater, the county leases space for field operations for the sheriff, and they've outgrown that long ago. And we also have space for confiscated, you know.
Yeah, it's a
stuff.
storage shop.
Yeah,
a
but
building.
yeah, it's storage.
Yeah.
facility. So our anticipation is that this new building will meet all those needs. We'll move them out of building 3, that will create space for district court. And we'll move them out of lease space and save that money.
Okay, the question I have is, where's this building located? Because there's a map, but it doesn't show where it's at.
Because at the time, we didn't have a specific building.
Okay.
But the building we're purchasing, I believe, is 111 Israel Road in Tumwater.
Okay,
I think it's 4-1.
I think it's 1111.
111, thank you.
okay. So Israel Road, Tumwater, which is outside the city limits of Olympia.
It is.
We heard testimony tonight about the RCW that requires the sheriff's department, the
Yes.
main facility, not what we call like the one out at the train depot or the train station and stuff like that.
Right, the sheriff will maintain an office at the courthouse to satisfy the state law.
Okay.
Technicality there.
Well, yeah, that is. The other question I have is the CIP, I thought the CIP, as it was explained to me a couple years ago by you, was new and expanded public facilities should be included in the CIP.
Don't we do have one in there.
Yeah.
We do?
Yes.
For 14 million for the purchase of the,
Well, it's a
Oh,
plan.
no, that is in we maintain because the county needs to be able to take opportunities when they arise.
right?
There is an item in the 2024-29 plan for land use purchase, as I believe there is one in the 2025-30 plan. It's not $14 million.
Right.
But it is a placeholder, and part of what we keep in mind is the CIP is a plan, not a budget.
Right. Which, okay. I get all that. Where's the 14 million coming from?
We intend to issue bonds
Right?
this fall. And the payment of the bonds will come from the new public safety sales tax.
And that will cover the cost of it?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And more.
And we have had legal weigh in on all of these questions.
I haven't asked these questions before.
Oh,
so-
no, so, no, just, I mean, in terms of,
I mean, I was just going through the CIP again because I knew we were having the public hearing and a couple of these came up because I heard the conversation about the sheriff's building being purchased and I didn't see it in the CIP. And I saw the $6 million renovation and I didn't even know we had a new building yet.
This year.
So,
And
go ahead. Oh,
just the discussion around these kinds of purchases typically happen in executive session, so as not to.
well, they
So
didn't
the
happen.
negotiation of
Yeah,
the
the-
purchase
Yeah.
of property or the sale of property is executive session.
Okay, so, okay, well, that was my primary question on the sheriff's office. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Okay. Is anybody else?
I got some stuff too, but if you want to let Commissioner Halverson finish, that'd be
Okay.
fine.
We can do it that way.
This one would be for water resources. Is Tim Wilson on tonight?
Yes.
Good evening.
Hi, Tim. In the underwater resources under stormwater utility projects for 2025, you show stormwater utility rates at $2,440, $2,244,000. That's the expected stormwater utility fees that are going to be paid by everybody in the county that participates in that fee program.
Where are you,
Sorry,
referencing?
page 43. Under revenue for projects.
Stormwater utility rates, so I think those are, so the funding source. Stormwater utility rates, I'm just trying to orient myself, I apologize. The utility rates that we collect in any given year are higher than that, so I think what that is referring to is the budgeted expenditure, planned expenditure for the capital projects for that year. Correct? So are you looking for at 2025, Mr. Halverson?
Right, it says revenues for projects, so that's where I was getting that from, 2,440,000. So what you're saying is that's not revenue, that's budgeted for stormwater utilities.
That's the planned expenditures for the year. And
Right.
the roughly 2.4 million, all of those funds that fund the capital program, the majority of those do come from our stormwater rates, the capital portion of that.
Right.
There's typically a transfer of roughly 1.8 million per year into that capital fund. That's just a ballpark. But yes, and then we have been very successful as of late in getting some Department of Ecology grants to help support those projects as well.
Okay, does that, those stormwater utility rates, does that include what the county is required to pay for a county road?
Yeah, the road portion of the stormwater rates does have a capital component as well. So they support capital projects as well.
Okay, and what is the county's rate for all the county roads in the county?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, the total collected. I know that we factor that on all of the road miles, so over 1,000 road miles. I can tell you that roughly how that is figured. It is figured at about 30% of the rate for comparable impervious surfaces for private properties and commercial properties. And that is very similar to how we collect for state highways. We collect at the same rate, and that's per state statute that we're allowed to do that.
Okay, so the state, I know the state statute covers the state roads and the collection of stormwater fees for state roads. But that same statute covers county roads as well?
The same RCW does, but a different portion of the statute. And I'd be happy to pull that and forward that to you or others.
Yeah, if you would, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the reason I'm curious about that, Ms. Campbell, is there's a lot of stormwater facilities that need improvement throughout the county. And I know Tim's not going to say this. He's a manager in the county, and he's not going to throw anybody under the bus for it, but I will. There's not enough money in the budget for what they need to do. And I'm not sure that the county is paying the right rate for the county's portion of the stormwater fees. I mean, can you elaborate on that?
I don't know what the rate is, but I can tell you that the roads pays approximately $1.2 million a year in stormwater fees.
I could also add some context to that, perhaps. So the statute that I'm going to send to you does call out that the county legislative authority or whoever is setting the rates, when considering the rates for the county roads, may consider in-kind services such as stream restoration, improvement, maintenance, those types of things. And when I looked into this last, I believe in 2023, the rate reduction, if you will, I don't like to call it that, but the rate reduction is roughly half of what the county is contributing for salmon restoration projects, salmon barrier removals, maintenance, those types of things. So when I looked into that, it really made sense. I would add that we are in the middle of a stormwater comprehensive study where we have a third party looking at our utility and kind of diving into some of these issues. They've weighed in on this as well with a technical memorandum, a draft technical memorandum that states that it's very appropriate how the board has set rates for the county roads.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is you're satisfied with the rate that the county is paying into the stormwater fees based on the RCW and your knowledge of the document you just sent me.
Yeah, I would say that if you look at the collection for our capital program, we tend to struggle at times with the employment environment to find enough engineers and staff to utilize the money in the way that we like to. So we're not running into, not being funded well enough in the program is my opinion at this point.
Okay. Tim, I'm saying this because for the last 9 years, I've been watching this really close, as you know, from the stormwater fees. And I've never seen you have enough money to take care of all the stormwater facility projects that you need. And when I see 2025 at $2,440,000 for stormwater utility rates, that says revenue for projects. I just was wondering how much the overall revenue is. That you said that's for budgeted programs. But the terminology on page 43 doesn't seem to match that. That's why I'm kind of confused.
It's for budgeted projects, for budgeted capital projects. That's very, very separate from our O&M and our other stormwater programs. I guess the question I would have is, yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say that we're not don't have enough money to fund the projects that we want to. These are the identified projects,
right?
And they are, as you can see, there's adequate funding there to do that if we were to have the staff to build them out. So maybe I misunderstood the question. I apologize for that.
Got it right.
Okay.
Because the overall budget includes your FTE and your all your admin and everything else that goes along with it. This is just for the projects.
Correct.
So what's the total revenue for water resources?
I want to say, I believe it's over 5 million, but that includes a transfer from the operating fund. I would have to look to be sure. I think it's in the $5 to $6 million range.
And what's the transfer from operating funds?
It's about 1.3 million last year. I just happened on a completely different reason. I happened to be looking at this earlier today.
And where do the operating funds come from?
Operating funds from stormwater fees.
Okay, you're
They're
talking
generated from stormwater fees.
Okay, those are dedicated stormwater fees that people pay into it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
People, the county,
Right.
state.
Okay. That's all the questions I've got.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin, we're gonna go to you next.
I guess I'm really struck, especially by given the conversation we were just having about litigated stormwater treatment. When we had discussed the expanded sheriff's office at the meeting before this, I was, and this is my own misunderstanding and my own fault here, but I was under the mistaken impression that there was dedicated funding that was going to that rather than that coming out of funding that we could be using for other projects. I'm a little dismayed at the amount of money that is going into this project, given how hard it is for us to balance everything else. I recognize that we are not a budgeting committee, and that we don't really have discretion over how other groups spend their money. But in terms of dedicating planning resources that will then get spent into that, I'm really uncomfortable with the share of funds that, especially the share of our bonds and other funds that are going into this facility, given the scope of the needs that we have for basic infrastructure and for the kind of aggressive work that we've been talking about needing to do for growth. This seems like I don't see the good for the county that this is that justifies that kind of expense coming from our bonds.
I think it's worth noting, again, this is not the budget.
Right.
And this is just a planning document. And this is developed based on Public Works and Central Services identifying projects and different revenues. But again, the budget gets passed when the budget gets passed.
Right.
And some of these things are outside community planning scope
Sure.
as to revenues and expenditures.
I have no qualms with it being brought to our attention as a proposal. I just recognize that while we aren't a budgeting committee, we are bringing stuff forward that then impacts that budget and where that's getting allocated. And we are talking about struggling for a lot of our basic growth needs. So something like this is something that I just think that we have a responsibility to have a stake on it. Have a say on it.
If I may.
Yes, please.
So just to be clear, we are going to issue bonds to pay for the building because we don't have 20 million in the bank right now. But the source for the bond payments is funding that is restricted. It must be spent public safety for the sheriff. The public safety tax was passed by voters, I want to say last November. And we specifically in the resolution talked about the infrastructure that would be needed to support the new sheriff deputies. In today's available space, there is no space for new deputies. So we need the new facility to house the sheriff. It was part of the plan when we proposed the tax, and that's what will be used to make the payments for the building and the renovations. And we've got the project manager, Rick Thomas, is online, and he can talk a little bit about what those renovations would be, but the funding source is restricted.
Just from the proposal, 75% of the tax was restricted for law enforcement protection. 25% was allocated for additional prosecution and responsive public defense services and election security infrastructure. So
Election security infrastructure?
yes. So 75% of it is basically locked to law enforcement. We can't,
Right.
yeah, that's the way the proposal was structured.
Commissioner Casino.
Thank you. Some of you, I'm sure some of you have heard this before, but CIP is my largest frustration of what we do at the Planning Commission. More so than Shoreline Master Program, more so than comp plan or anything else. But I want to just kind of remind everybody that one of the duties of the Planning Commission is to oversee county government. We're often the first and last lines on decisions for the BOCC, and our oversight is also a key component of public participation and transparent government. And I have a few objections, and they kind of come in two different buckets. One bucket is this particular program, and the other one is how we review this program. And I understand now that there's probably going to be some changes coming up that hopefully will get talked about soon. But in the meantime, just to get onto this program, I do have some big issues with it. A capital facility is defined in Chapter 6. We know what a capital facility is. And a capital facility is, well, the Attorney General calls it various kinds of things which may be done to attract or parcel of tangible real property as an improvement there too. And I think that a lot of times we forget some of that and we start spending money on things that aren't really capital facilities and we call them capital facilities. I think that that definition that we have for a capital facility, and we also have a capital facility in our comp plan, a capital facility definition. And I think that we kind of ignore it sometimes. It gets fuzzy on the edges and it makes me really uncomfortable when we do that. Another problem that I have with this particular CIP is what the Assistant County Manager talked about as a placeholder. And the placeholder is on the CIP, I think this time it was on page 151 or 152, and it's a land acquisition. And we use the term land acquisition as a catch-all, so that way the county can do whatever they want if an opportunity comes up last minute. Well, the whole idea of planning is to not do things that come up last minute. We're not supposed to always be in an emergency to do something. We're not supposed to always be at the very last minute before we have to make a decision. And moreover, we're using this land acquisition specifically on this new sheriff's building. We're calling it a land acquisition when it's really a new facility. And if you call it a new facility, you have to do a full comp plan update before you can do anything with it. If you call it a land acquisition that's already in the CIP, you don't. Or if you want to do a minor amendment, you could do it that way. Or if it's not a new facility, there's a couple other ways that you can add it and find funding for it. But if it's a new facility, you actually have to go through a full comp plan amendment before you can do anything with it. And so this squishy placeholder land acquisition project type stuff that we see in a couple of places in the CIP, I think that should be removed. It's fraught for abuse. It makes it so that way we don't actually plan, we only react. And I don't think that that's good for the taxpayers. I also think that one of the problems that we have when we review these programs in general is this is a big document. We don't really have the full capacity for a proper analysis of it, not only because of the size of the document and how much time we spend on it, but we don't do anything with a level of surface analysis. We barely look at any kind of financial situations that are in there. And there's some real questions about how we actually pay for this stuff. One of the examples that we have is that we now kind of use REIT as a credit card instead of a savings account. And REIT really should be used as a savings account. And now we use REIT to pay back, we use it as a debt service instrument. We're paying back a bond with REIT money. When we have a resolution, a county code, and a general county standards board that says that you're not supposed to use REIT as a debt service instrument. So we're spending money faster than we're taking it in. And then we're changing how we pay for stuff by taking out bonds and then paying for it when we shouldn't be using those funds to pay for debt service. With all that, with this particular plan and with the review of this plan, it really leaves us in a position where the Planning Commission is ineffective and we're just asked to be a rubber stamp on these kind of things because we can't really take the time to really dig into it. And you want us to rubber stamp it and say that everything's good. And if we don't do it, then you do a minor amendment process to sneak it around the Planning Commission. And by sneaking it around the Planning Commission, you're cutting the public participation in half. And you're speeding up the time twice as fast. And you're just not giving the public the opportunities to really look at what's going on. And I understand, again, it's always because we're in an emergency. We're always in a hurry. But that's the opposite of how you should plan for things. So with that, I would move that we forward this to the county commissioners with no recommendation from the Planning Commission and that they could do whatever they want with it, but I am not comfortable with signing my name to any of this.
Seconded.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
I would just add that it's a 170-page document, and despite its length, very few of those things provide enough details for us to provide any meaningful oversight of the process. This entire process on the capital improvement plan makes me feel frustratingly impotent to impact this entire situation. So I would agree with Commissioner Casino's motion.
Yeah, so I just want to contrast how I feel about this, our process here with our process for the comprehensive plan overall. I feel like the staff has done an excellent job of keeping us very engaged and informed in progress on the comprehensive plan overall. I feel comfortable with where that process is going in a way I do not feel comfortable with this. I think it's a model for how we could have done this differently that would have changed my feeling about approving it. So I do want to give credit where it's due, that you guys have done an excellent job of keeping us informed overall. I do not feel comfortable.
Well, I think we've had this discussion many times.
Yeah.
And it is frustrating how little, but basically this is in my opinion, this is something that it's required by state law to be in the comp plan, which requires it to go through us. But all this stuff is budgeted. You know, we don't have any control over the budget. The county commissioners do all that. And as far as the blank spaces, you know, if the county is looking for a park and a piece of land comes available and they have to wait till next year to come back and apply for that money or get that money put into the comp plan, then that property is probably gone anyways. So there's a lot of, I agree there's room for abuse, but there's also a lot of lost opportunities if you don't keep those, because you absolutely cannot do stuff like land acquisitions when it's not in this program.
Can I provide some context? Because this has come up with the planning commission. And so that means we've been doing research to figure out what other counties do and what kind of CIPs are they adopting as part of their comp plan? Because the planning commission moved a few months back to just completely remove Appendix G.
Right.
I got Whatcom County's open right now. They plan under the same RCWs as us. Their CIP is 24 pages. That's it. The level of detail provided, so the whole sheriff's office and all that, it's 2 pages. And I could pass around what's in there, but it's essentially sheriff's office relocation, a funding source, and like an amount. That's the level of detail that it's pretty on par with what we're seeing other counties have. So I just want to make sure there's some context for what Thurston County has provided in the past with a CIP. And based on the planning commission's feedback, we were actually looking at these other models are like, is this more appropriate? It's at that high planning level. It's really looking at the connectivity between the CIP and the policies and the comp plan rather than the minutia of every project. And then reaching out to those jurisdictions, you know, like how is it going for you? What does your process look like? But I just want, for those who are new on the planning commission, this is the first time they've seen a CIP. I just want to let you know what other counties are doing with their CIPs.
And I'll add to that, Ashley, that a lot of those other county planning commissions do not delve into stuff like we do. Frankly.
No, we'll probably hear that when we reach out to them.
I've reached out to some of them and they have very little input at all. They come and it's kind of like Commissioner Casino said, it's just a rubber stamp. Okay, well, that's it. Whoop, there you go. And we've tried not to do that.
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Nelson had said earlier about how we do need these placeholders. That way we can get targets of opportunity. Where I vary from that is having something in there that says we want to buy a park is one thing. We had something in there that said we want to buy a new sheriff's facility. That's another thing. We want to buy a new ballot processing center. That's another thing. Those are very specific projects that the public would then know about and could discuss, and they can engage their elected officials about. But when you have something as nebulous as land acquisition, and then you've used, like, our last 2 big purchases were a ballot processing center and now a sheriff's office. Those weren't listed. Those were both bought under land acquisition. in the CIP. And I think that those are specifically the kind of things that we need to plan for. You know, whether or not there's gonna be a park in Rochester instead of Grand Mount, okay, I could see where land acquisition probably makes sense. But when it comes to something as big as an elected official's work center, we need to do better planning for it and not always be in an emergency where, oh my gosh, we just got a new funding source. Let's spend the money as quick as we can. We'll get some bonds to do it.
I just also see something substantively different about the idea of a preservation-based purchase. Like a park is largely a placeholder, like it is an open space that can be used in a variety of ways, versus something that is, as you were saying, a dedicated use facility. And I feel like it makes sense to split those in terms of like, if you don't get this particular piece of land for a park, that like the land use is pretty specific. Like it's a barrier for, or it's relatively unused land, and it can often be really location specific, whereas we need a piece of land for this new facility. There's a lot more in that. It's a lot more complex of a decision, and it just doesn't make sense to have those both be the same level of oversight to me. So I would support splitting those kinds of decisions.
We do have a motion on the floor.
We have a motion on the floor. Thank you. If there's no further discussion, I would take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Barger,
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino,
Aye.
Commissioner Kaiser,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Nay.
Commissioner Fishburne,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Okay.
And I don't know who's gonna be writing up our letter, but I will send you my crib sheet so you can include those in the findings.
To do so.
I would
Just
move,
following with how we approached the LRA recommendation letter, you all made a motion for specific addition. So I just wanna, with projects I'm doing, be consistent, not to overstep as I'm just a staff member, but.
So motion to include Commissioner Casino's notes in our recommendation to the Planning Commission.
County Commission.
Oh, sorry, I'm very sorry, to the Board of Commissioners.
Seconded.
Second. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Number 8 on our agenda is, number 7 on our agenda is work session number 22 on Thurston 2045, the climate element.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. For staying.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Cascadia, we've got Andrea, will be presenting tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay.
Can I ask a quick
Hi,
question?
Planning Commission. Oh,
Can I ask a
sorry.
quick question, Ms. Martin, before we get started of staff, this is not the last time we will see this chapter.
No, well, there's sort of the focus item on the agenda to just look at the chapter.
Mhm.
And then really the next step we're hoping is to start pulling all these pieces together into one document. Because, you know, even as I was reading through Black Hills Audubon Society notes, a lot of those may be more appropriate for chapter 9, but how do you know that if you're only looking at the climate chapter? And so I think it's really trying to get it all together. So the next time you see it, it's one piece of a broader document and you can start, you know, finding the connectivity.
Okay.
Say on that note, that I strongly support the Black Hills Audubon Society's recommendations. As myself as a planning commissioner, I would love to see how we can integrate those. So I just want that on the record that I support this.
Yeah, and just one more thing on that, they reference a lot of organizations that are currently working within our region on these issues. And our plan is to invite representatives from those for, remember how we reserved December as the let's all learn new things together. We're seeing if RHC can come so they can talk about all the affordable housing initiatives and whether representatives from some of the groups working on all the wildlife habitat corridors, because it really is more at the state level and these nonprofits that are working in coordination with one another. So anyway, more to come.
My question was, because looking at being that we're 30 minutes long on the agenda right now, a couple of things. One, we don't have to get every question answered tonight, probably. And two, maybe before we get started, we want to go through whatever process we need to assign another chair for the meeting, just in case I have to leave well before we're done. And I'm not sure what that process is.
We take a nomination and vote on it.
Okay.
Would nominate Commissioner Casino to step down.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you very much.
And I'll give you the yellow folder.
Oh, you want me to start this?
Well, I think we just, I don't know if it's
Well,
official now or
I think
as needed, but.
let's do this as needed, but let's have Andrea start her program.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Martin, for letting us get through that little housekeeping issue.
Yeah, no problem. Well, hello, Planning Commission again. Good to see you all. Today, I'll be providing an update on the draft climate element. Today's update will be a summary of the draft climate element, including an overview of the planning context, key resilience, and greenhouse gas emissions considerations, and the draft goals and policies. As a reminder, we have two primary policy objectives for this climate element. Through the resilience policies, we'll seek to advance environmental justice, adapt to and mitigate the effects of a changing climate, and protect and enhance the environment, economy, and human health and safety. And through greenhouse gas emission reduction policies, we'll seek to measure, reduce, and eliminate local greenhouse gas emissions and per capita vehicle miles traveled. So to provide some quick summary context for each of these, around resilience policies, Thurston County stands to see warmer temperatures that threaten public health, infrastructure, and agriculture, among other sectors. We also anticipate precipitation changes that can impact aquatic species such as salmon, habitats, and water supply. And with precipitation changes and sea level rise, we're also seeing an increased potential flood risk that can threaten county infrastructure systems and buildings, especially in lower lying areas. Around greenhouse gas emission reduction, we have Thurston County's greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which estimated that the community emitted about 14.1 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per capita, and that's compared to the latest statewide average of about 13.5. And we anticipate that emissions will increase in the future with population and economic growth. And some of the top contributors of emissions includes building energy consumption for commercial and residential buildings. And I'll dive into some of this policy context in more detail here in the following slides. So first I'll focus some time on the climate resilience context, providing an overview of key sectors related to climate resilience, human well-being and public services, ecosystems and water resources, infrastructure, community design, land use and economic development, and natural resource lands and economies. I want to note that this information is informed by the climate vulnerability assessment. That assessment is currently in draft form, and you'll be able to see that final version in an upcoming commission meeting where we review the technical appendix. So regarding human well-being and public services, it's important to note that each climate hazard can bring its own set of adverse public health outcomes. So for example, wildfire smoke in particular can trigger acute respiratory conditions, while flooding, for example, can bring safety concerns. These well-being impacts can vary across the county depending on the anticipated impact and the concentration of sensitive populations. The map that you see on the right shows the geographic distribution of sensitive groups in Thurston County who may be more at risk than the general population, including people of color, outside workers, older adults, and people with poor physical health. We also want to note that some public services that can help build community resilience, such as medical services, libraries, parks, and open spaces, are also at risk of climate impacts. So those are doubly important to look at and protect through this effort. Quickly touching on ecosystems and water resources, climate change will of course impact ecosystems and water resources. Changes such as rising temperatures and shifting precipitation patterns can degrade habitat, including for salmonids, and increase competition for water resources. We also want to note that forests and prairies in particular may face significant impacts, including pest and disease outbreaks and declines in certain plant populations. Related to water resources, county water resources staff are still finalizing water resources policy language for the climate chapter, but the topics the policies will respond to include monitoring and research to support forecasting of water availability, encouraging climate studies for impact analyses and management, and pursuing projects that improve and protect in-stream flows. Climate change also brings risk to county infrastructure. For example, energy infrastructure faces supply constraints from reduced snowpack, and energy delivery can be disrupted as extreme events intensify. And concurrent with that, we also see increased demand for energy for cooling, for example, due to increased temperatures. County transportation infrastructure is also at risk, particularly from extreme heat and flooding. It's also important to think about climate impacts and resiliency strategies in the context of community design, land use, and economic development. Expanded development can lead to more wildland-urban interface or WUI areas. Flooding, sea level rise, and wildfire can disrupt business operations and economic development. And urban commercial and industrial areas with more impervious surface and less tree canopy face flooding and heat risk. For example, you can see areas of the county with higher land surface temperatures on the map on the right, noting some areas of Yelm and Olympia at higher risk. Climate change also threatens the county's natural resource lands and economies. So for example, croplands face the risk of crop quality impacts, pests, and sunburns. Livestock can be vulnerable to heat stress, flooding, and wildfire. Shellfish face ocean warming, acidification, shoreline development, and runoff. And forest growth can be reduced with summer drought, wildfire, invasive species, and insects. I hope that provides a helpful overview of climate resilience context for Thurston County. Now I just want to turn to the other focus area for the climate chapter, which is greenhouse gas emissions. So here I'll touch on both the community-wide emissions and county operations emissions, greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and emission trends for particular sectors and sources. In 2022, we estimate that the Thurston County community, including residents, businesses, and visitors, emitted the equivalent of 14.1 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per capita. This can be compared to the statewide average of about 13.5. As you can see in the pie chart on the right, key sources include from on-road vehicle travel, electricity consumption, tree loss, and natural gas consumption. When looking at the Thurston County government operations, we estimate the county emitted almost 12,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. This is small compared to the community as a whole. It's equivalent to less than 1% of the community-wide emissions. The but key sources nonetheless of county operations emissions include facility electricity and natural gas use, landfill methane emissions, and employee commuting. State guidance also calls for jurisdictions to align with state greenhouse gas emission reductions as part of the new climate chapter. The state targets call for a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, 70% reduction by 2040, and 95% reduction by 2050. And these are compared to 2015 levels. I noted that natural gas and electricity consumption are two of the primary sources of emissions from the community. Overall, building energy consumption makes up about a third of overall emissions, and most of these emissions stem from electricity consumption in the residential and commercial building sectors, as well as residential natural gas. Transportation is also a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions from the Thurston County community. Over half of emissions in this sector stem from passenger vehicle on-road travel, followed by freight and commercial vehicles, air travel, and off-road equipment. The greenhouse gas inventory also accounts for emissions from land use changes and practices, including agriculture, forest management, and tree canopy loss. These land use emissions accounted for almost a quarter of the Thurston County community's greenhouse gas emissions in 2022. Most of these land use emissions are from tree loss. According to remote sensing data, we estimate that approximately 20,000 or so acres of land in Thurston County have experienced some kind of tree or canopy loss since 2016. We don't have information on the exact spatial distribution of these tree losses, but we can say that key causes are from forest disturbances and loss of trees outside of forests.
So I would say in the analysis that we've done, and I did send this clarifying question, and it sounds like they didn't have time to answer it. Because we have commercial forestry operations, I wondered if a lot of that number had to do with those, because as we are looking at conversions, we have not seen anything close to that. But depending on we know from our LiDAR data analysis, if it's within, it's like 6 years of a cut, it's showing up as grass shrub. So depending on the cycle of the cuts, all of those areas would pop up as being deforested when they're being replanted for commercial forestry. So I just wanted to highlight that because when I saw that number, I was like,
Capital Forest and JBLM and those type of lands from your calculations?
I don't know if Cascadia has excluded them. I know for our analysis, it's not, you'll end up seeing it. It's like hexagons, it's not parcel based, and so it's really hard to just exclude something.
Well, to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Halverson said, if these targeted greenhouse gas emission reductions coming down from the state do include things that are outside of our jurisdiction because they're Fed or JBLM, I mean, that's less than fair.
Or state.
State,
Yeah.
state or Fed, yeah.
Yeah.
State,
Fed,
well, yeah, I
JBL,
mean,
yeah.
all commercial forestry operations are state regulated. We don't see
How
them.
can
They're all
we be
DNR.
responsible for that?
I don't know, that's a really good question. We do have, so what we are collecting is information on what percentage of the lands in Thurston County fall in that category. But I think that's a good question. We can follow up with Cascadia on that, but we did develop policies around that, knowing that we don't have direct jurisdiction over them. And so looking at developing sustainable forest management plans, and there are things we could proactively do as a county, even without jurisdiction.
Conservation futures.
There's that, I was actually thinking of their models of this in other parts of the country where you just work with a commercial forestry operator to essentially adopt different forest practices. And so you pay for the loss, potential loss, or
Couldn't afford it with warehouse.
I'm just saying that there are tools in the toolbox if the county wanted to pursue trying to incentivize sustainable forest management practices.
Have you found examples of that with other agricultural operations? Like incentivizing management changes that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions or increase sequestration of carbon?
I think they're way more in place already for ag operators. So be it like our voluntary stewardship program, cost share operates like that. A lot of the NRCS programs operate like that, or other cost share programs. So I think those incentives they're already out there, and we have one of the highest rates of cost share projects, at least out of the counties that participate in voluntary stewardship. We got the most money last year for the conservation practices.
There's, I was curious about the way emissions and then carbon storage are calculated, and if they're calculated together in some way, because you could see a cut, forest harvest that would be then replanted immediately almost as is practice, and growing carbon sequestration occurring on that landscape. We're not sort of seeing that in the way this is presented, which I'm just trying to understand. Are we looking at all these different sort of siloed pieces of data? Or is there some kind of balance where we're saying carbon storage versus greenhouse gas emission?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I can answer that.
I'll come to you next.
Andrea, do you have a response to that now, or do you want to get back?
Yeah, I'm happy to. We did look at carbon sequestration across the landscape as part of the inventory. It's not included in this pie chart because it's a different process, right? It's sequestration as opposed to emissions. And the accepted protocols for greenhouse gas inventorying call for accounting those two things separately, and just looking at gross emissions when looking at that emissions piece. So that's what we're looking at here, are gross emissions, but acknowledging, like it's been noted, that while there are some areas that are experiencing tree loss, there are other areas that could be gaining biomass as you see regrowth of forest. So it's not including this pie chart, and the inventory does not account for that in these numbers, but it is noted in the report. So I'm happy to share that with you. I believe that the county has that available.
Thanks.
Commissioner Martin.
I agree that it's not, it's unfortunate that we're being asked to take account for things that we have no particular control over. I guess my two responses to that would be, one, finding levers that we do have of control over that, which I think is what Ashley was referring to in some ways. And then if we could have a way within our own math, at least, of making sure that we're compensating for that, it would be really useful. I do question whether or not managed forests of the sort that we're discussing, whether that counts as sequestration, because a lot of that ends up getting, that biomass ends up getting back into the atmosphere through construction or through wood burning or any other things. So those planted forests do have an effect in that regard in terms of our sequestration capabilities. I also do appreciate keeping the sequestration and the emissions separate, because otherwise I have a feeling the sequestration has a tendency to get double counted.
In terms of levers, I just wanted to highlight Thurston Climate Action Team, I think, did a good job with some of their suggested edits of trying to identify where the county might be able to work more proactively to advocate for changes at the state legislature.
Ms. Martin, please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for these questions. Other emission sources from the Thurston County community include leakage from refrigerant usage, methane, and other greenhouse gas emissions from solid waste generation and disposal, and also wastewater treatment. But these are a larger, or a smaller proportion rather, compared to the other sources that I noted. So these resilience and greenhouse gas emissions context was used to inform the development of the draft policies for the climate element, which you all were able to review last month and we're bringing back again today. As you can see in your packet, we've made some edits and updates to the draft policies that are in reaction to the feedback that we received from you all last month. And those are noted in strike throughs to show deletions and red text to show additions. So our next step will be to finalize the climate chapter as well as the vulnerability assessment. That vulnerability assessment will be included in the technical appendix that will accompany the plan and we brought to an upcoming planning commission meeting. And that is all I have for today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I wanted to step back a little bit and look at the transportation greenhouse gas emissions in the county by sector and source when it specifically about transportation, and it kind of piggybacks on some of the other things we were talking about here with, in this example, we have on-road vehicles, off-road vehicles, aviation, and it's kind of two parts. The first part is how much of that are we responsible for? Because we don't have anything to do with our municipal airport and we don't have anything to do with I-5. And I imagine that those are huge contributors. And the second part of that really is I'm a little bit astounded that 16% of our vehicle emissions come from aviation. And is that specific to the Olympia Regional Airport, or are we picking up stuff, you know, SeaTac's 45 minutes north, they're getting dinged for that too, because they're only at 20,000 feet instead of 35,000 feet by the time they come over our area, or how are those calculations being made?
Yeah, great question. So we do include fuel use at local municipal airports. So that would include, I think, the airport that you mentioned. And it also does include emissions from SeaTac. The way that we include that is we allocate a portion of SeaTac's fuel use to the county based on income weighted population. So SeaTac has surveys on who's flying and where they're coming from. And we use that to estimate what proportion of air travel that's coming through SeaTac is attributable to Thurston County residents.
What would you, then if they fill up fuel in Olympia at the Olympia Airport, are we getting hit with that whole tank's worth or just what they're burning above Thurston County? If we're gonna take the hit for what's being filled up in SeaTac, what's burned over in Thurston County, I don't think we should take the hit for all the fuel that's loaded up at the Olympia Airport.
I might just gently reframe, because I don't see it as taking the hit. I see it as identifying the size of the problem and what we might be able to accurately identify as our county's portion of it.
I would normally agree with that if we had control over what happened at the airport on I-5, but since we don't have any control over that, I don't like being held responsible for it.
And I don't think it's being held responsible, but point taken. Commissioner Bartlett.
See Commissioner Kaiser as well.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on the airport. We do have private pilots based in Olympia who are buying fuel in Olympia and flying. Okay, we have that. We also have the state operating a massive wildfire response program out of the Olympia Airport, and they're buying all the fuel there. So.
I did have a comment. And thank you for bringing that up. So that shortens my comment. I do, it sounds like, I was also very confused by this, and I don't like the idea of us taking on things that that aren't being taken into account by other counties, that aren't being allocated fairly. But if it is in fact coming from the use of CFAC by us, then that is something that is within our purview and something that we can do something about. That fits into our own incentive structure of like, how do we incentivize the use of the airport versus other things. And that's something that we have a little bit more say on. I think that's a little bit more fair than like, oh yeah, these are the number of planes that are flying over us and we get this percentage of the planes that happen to be there. that doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, but that's not what you guys are doing. You are in fact going off of our actual flights, not just the flights that happen to go over.
It was a
Yeah,
weird
for SeaTac, it's attributing some portion of fuel use to activity by Thurston County residents.
Calculated by income weighted, you said?
Yeah, income weighted population. Mhm.
So
Compared
you,
to other Puget Sound counties.
you make an assumption how much we're flying out of, how much Thurston County people are flying by proxy, how much money they make.
And how many people there are.
An interesting proxy.
Commissioner Bombarder.
Curious, it sounds like great efforts have been made to identify emissions that are stemming from residents of the county versus people who are visiting or passing through the county. Our on-road miles traveled is more than a quarter of our total greenhouse gas emissions. Do we have a breakdown of what percentage of that is non-residents moving through the county versus people who live here? Because we're going to have far more levers to pull for folks who live here than folks who are just buzzing through on I-5. And it'd be useful to know when we're considering methodologies, you know, which of those will actually be impactful to that group and which won't.
Mm-hmm. Currently, we use BMT data from the state's HPMS data, the Highway Performance Management System Monitoring System. And so it's not accounting for just people who start and end in Thurston County. So there could be pass-through included here for sure. I will say that acknowledging this very issue that you're mentioning, the state has procured a third-party big data vendor to provide more kind of origin destination VMT data that is meant to estimate what you're looking at, and that's aimed to be available by the end of the year. So we don't have that integrated right now, but we plan to update this information with those new VMT estimates when it's available from the state.
I'd be very interested to see those numbers.
I see that Tom Crawford has raised his hand. Mr. Crawford, I don't think that we can take comment from you right now without setting a precedent that might come back to bite us in the future. And so I would ask that maybe if you have comments, you could put them in the chat or send them to staff, or Ashley is giving me a.
Yeah, if he emails me, we'll be sure to share it.
Your comments will get to us if you put them in writing in one of those two ways.
And we appreciate that.
And thank you, and we do want to hear from the Thurston Climate Action Team about this chapter, so but I just am hesitant to set a precedent that the public can comment at any time during the meeting. Commissioner Bartlett.
Yeah, I just wanted to step back to the conversation about aviation really quick. I'm generally very much in favor of a Maoist approach to how we handle the wealthy people in our county, but I don't actually think that in this context, having just wealth as a proxy for airplane usage gets to the incentive structure that we can actually implement here. We can't. Aside from simple elimination of wealthy folks, that doesn't actually give us a lever. Again, I'm not saying that that's a no from me. It's not actually getting to what we need here. And I would like to find numbers on that are actionable for us. If we're going to be taking them into account, I would like to have mechanisms that we can use. So that's just my comment on that. I would like to see something that we could, like, I'm not opposed to that being included. I would just like to see how we can.
Real quick, a question. Since we're focusing pretty heavily on this, do we know what percentage of that aviation, that 6% slice comes from CTAC calculations?
16% of
Okay, 16, so of the 16%, do we know how much of that is contributed from calculating, well, I was 6% of total greenhouse emissions, 16% of
transportation related.
transportation,
Got
yeah.
it. Thank you.
Do we know what chunk of that is CTAC? Because if it's like 0.5%, then this may be a waste of our time. I just wanna make sure we're focusing on what's actionable and impactful.
Yeah, I don't have that number right in front of me, but in general, the proportion from CTAC has been generally higher than the municipal airports for other counties. So
More than half, is what you're saying? More than
I'm
half.
not sure. I can't tell you that for sure. But
It's possible to
would-
get the information and follow up. I would.
Yeah, that would be
That would be
shocking.
very interesting.
sure, yeah, happy to do that.
Been,
Nominal.
yeah, thank you, yeah. I have a quick question. I think it was on slide 12. You were showing that our per capita emissions in Thurston County are above average. I wondered if there was anything that stood out to you as a reason why. If it's that most counties in this state have public utility districts and the fuel mix for our energy is less hydro
Yeah,
on a percentage basis than other counties.
I would say that the proportion coming from electricity is higher than I see in some other counties. Yeah, that might be more based on hydro. So I think that's one potential comparison. I will note that it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison to that statewide average. There are different methodologies that the state uses. So, I would say don't hone in on that comparison too much. But yeah, I think in general, compared to other counties, I've seen electricity is a little bit higher and proportionally.
State buildings, apartments here that run their lights and heat 24/7. Yeah, I know. They are some lovely eyesores just blaring light all 2 AM.
We're just talking about how Thurston County is the recipient of all the state buildings, departments, facilities, which has a lot of energy push right there.
Their work products essentially serve the whole state, so we're subsidizing that as well.
They've acknowledged that too, but it's huge.
Yeah. Any other comments? Okay.
We'll have more when it comes back up again.
Yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversation on this chapter.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow. Maybe off the hook.
Yeah.
Next on our agenda, general Thurston 2045 update.
We tried it tonight. We had one person show up, but we're doing like little mini pop-up open houses before some of the planning commission meetings, especially if there are chapters of interest to folks. So we'll continue to try to get the word out. We worked with the PIO's office to try to get the word out about this one. But it's just another chance for folks to come ask planners questions. We're here anyway, so we thought we'd take advantage of that time. There you go.
That's smart. I like that.
Come have dinner with us at the atrium and ask whatever planning questions you want, so. Yeah. So we're gonna do a few this year and then next year try to come up with a more regular schedule so people can kind of work it into their calendar.
How is that announced?
We mostly use like our email, social media, things like that.
Let us know so that we can sort of encourage folks to.
Next will be like November.
November 20th is the next one.
Is it November 20th? Sounds good.
It's close to Thanksgiving.
Come have Thanksgiving festivities with us.
Christina?
Do we know if the board has rescheduled another LRA work session yet?
Sorry, Tom Crawford just sent in notes, so I was looking at him. Yes, I don't know the date off the top of my head, do you? I can look it up.
Yeah, if you could send an email telling everybody when that work session would be, I would appreciate it.
I might be able to find it. October 2nd.
Oh, soon.
Wow.
And the questions from the board were about amending the definition. So we'll be bringing back a revised definition. And then there were the questions about looking into business licensing and inspection.
That's morning work session.
It's a morning work session. And I was actually on the phone call with the auditor's office, looking into the business licensing program. Sounds like the county's business license program is very narrowly scoped. They get a handful each year. And this would be, if we added all privately operated residential facilities,
Because
it
we
would
can't
be
target specifically these, we would have to make it
it would
available
have to
for all
be
of them.
all of them. So that's all the residential facilities, group homes, everything. And so they don't currently have any kind of capacity for that. And so, and they also said they wouldn't have the professional skill set to do any kind of inspections, that would really be the state is the most appropriate body. So we did follow up with them. And that's the information we'll be sharing with the board. So if the board wants to look into that further, they would need to work with the auditor's office to kind of scope a plan.
Figure out how many FTEs it would take to do it.
Is that a 10 a.m. meeting?
I think it's like 9 to 11 is traditionally the time set aside for those morning ones. And long-term ag zoning is also going that morning. I know that one hasn't, well, a lot of you never saw it, and for those of you that did see it, it's been a long time since we've brought anything back to the board. It'll be a big planning morning. But we can send out a note to the planning commission with both of those items. So if you want to tune in, you can.
Okay. We made it through staff updates and calendar earlier, unless you need to revisit those, Ashley. Okay. Then next on our agenda, item 11, good of the order. I have one thing and I'm happy to go last. Do you want to go?
Sure. So the state's employee group, Latino Leadership Network, is having a Hispanic Heritage event on September the 28th from 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Sylvania Park. There's 3 different cultural celebrations or performances going on. And then, as I think I mentioned in our last meeting, the Hispanic Roundtable of South Sound is co-sponsoring with Thurston County Media an event on September 21st. I apologize that I did those backwards. Doors open at 7 at Thurston County Media. Concert starts at 7:30. Tickets are available online and benefits Thurston County Media and the Latinx Youth Summit.
I just had one thing that the city of Olympia has requested input from the public to name some facilities, including the park on Elm Highway. It used to be the Spooner Strawberry Farm, and the Olympia Armory project, which will be an art center for the city. And I, in conversation with one of our commissioners, heard a very good idea. The more I've thought about it, the more I like it.
Good
So
name.
if you were
I
interested in
thought
sharing.
The refuge would be a great term for it, because it's sort of a center for culture, it's a center for people, it's a safe place, and could potentially maybe someday be a resilience hub for us. So I thought the refuge keeps the structure, but rebrands it in a, more peaceful way.
And I've had several conversations with members of the Olympia City Council who are looking to that building as a potential resilience hub or emergency shelter to be part of an emergency response plan. So I think that name is
Versatile.
very appropriate.
Speaking of announcements, I know I mentioned to a few of you as you were coming in, but the fairgrounds is also, Fairgrounds and Event Center, you said Resilience Hub, that's also one of our resilience hubs. They're looking for a caretaker. And so if you know of anyone, it's a $650 monthly stipend, like a contract, for opening the gates in the morning, closing them, being available after hours to help people with events. And then housing is provided on the fairgrounds, and it's $450 a month for the housing. So there's two separate contracts essentially, but there is a net gain of $200 for someone who is interested in providing those services. So applications are open. I'm happy to email them out if you know of anyone who's interested. You can also find them on Facebook, the fairgrounds webpage. It's a really cool opportunity though, to be part of a neat team out there.
I thought it was, they paid you $650 a month stipend and the home was free.
We have to set it up as two separate contracts, so that's why I want to highlight the $200 net.
Thank
And that comes with housing though, so
So
it's.
Your applicant expected to live on site then and take advantage of that?
Live on site. It's a mobile home just directly adjacent to Heritage Hall, has a giant, beautiful tree, like right out the front door. But yeah, you would be expected to live there.
Anyone else?
I just wanted Commissioner Kaiser and Commissioner Casino to know, I can't be there on the 2nd in the morning. I have another event that I can't get out of.
I'll probably be here.
Didn't know, Stan. I was at the last one.
Sorry?
I was at the last one.
They went to executive session, didn't they? And
They did executive session first and then had a quick overview.
Yeah, and as I noted, things are a little different in the boardroom. I know planning commissioners have historically been called up to the table, and they weren't at the last one.
Yeah, I made it known to them.
Yeah, I figured. I did give you a heads up though, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So I think now, unless something has changed, you may not get called up to.
Right.
We have no other business. I will go to motion to adjourn. Okay, well, having no other business, then I declare this meeting adjourned, and I thank you all for getting through it on time so that I can get out of here.
Drive safely.
Thank you.
Early.
Oh, it's early. Let the record show. 17 minutes I got.
Last 2 meetings.